from the book of Genesis, right near the beginning of our Bible, chapter 12, verses 1 through 9. And this is the beginning of the story of Abraham and Sarah. Before they became Abraham and Sarah, they were Abram and Sarai. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai, and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by stages, toward the Negev. This is the good news of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Will you please pray with me? Gracious and loving God, may these words of my mouth and this message from my heart be filled with your spirit and filled with your truth, and may it be heard with open ears and open hearts and open minds, and bring us a message that we need to hear for our lives today, for our world today, for our church today, and for your eternal kingdom. Amen. Well, now that the Christmas season is soon upon us, or I guess now upon us, we are going to be blessed with hearing lots of Christmas music over and over again. And one of the songs that you will invariably be hearing a lot, maybe you've started hearing it already, was introduced to us originally in the movie Meet Me in St. Louis. And that song begins, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make your hearts be light. Next year all our troubles will be out of sight." If you've seen the movie, you know that the singer is a very beautiful young Judy Garland, and she's singing to a beautiful, very little Margaret O'Brien, who plays her little sister in the movie. And Margaret O'Brien looks really sad. And Judy continues, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now on our troubles will be miles away." And by now, Margaret O'Brien's face is full on, tears streaming from her eyes, her nose is running, her lips are quivering. I don't know about you, but if you've seen that face, it is haunting. I don't think I've ever seen sadness so honestly portrayed on the screen. And I'll tell you that I heard that the director got that look from Margaret O'Brien by pulling her over right before they were supposed to shoot it, and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but your dog was just run over and killed." I kid you not. I hope that you get more from my sermon than just that, but I know. cruel and manipulative directorial tactics to children aside. That song, as it's sung and with its lyrics, is a very interesting presentation. It's very, very ironic because you have Judy Garland singing this beautiful song about how wonderful life is going to be after Christmas next year. There's going to be no more problems, no more tears, all happiness. And then you see Margaret O'Brien who's crying. Judy is really sad too, because the context of this song is that the family has just found out that they are going to be moving to New York, because that's where the dad is, increasing his career and going to New York, and the family is devastated. They do not want to move to New York. They love living in St. Louis. They want to stay right here. And Margaret O'Brien is so unhappy that she runs outside and beats up a snowman. And, when you see your daughter beating up a snowman, which the dad does, it does something to you, and it makes him realize how much his family doesn't want to move. They want to stay right here. So he changes his mind and decides that his career path will remain in St. Louis. Everybody can stay here. Super happy ending. Everybody gets to not have to move. And instead, at the very end of the movie, we see the family happily walking down the block to the World's Fair. So that is, they don't have to go globally. They can experience it right where they are. Now, this is a wonderful film. It's won a lot of awards. It's considered one of the most beautiful, evocative, nostalgic films ever made. It's one of the great films that makes us just want to look back at how good things were when you didn't have to go anywhere. You could just find your happiness right where you were. It's a great story, but I would say that it's not really a biblical story. Because the stories in the Bible, and this is a little Bible, but there's a lot of stories in here. They're almost all stories about people who take journeys, who go from place A to place B, sometimes because they really want to, sometimes because they're being chased, sometimes because they just have to. It starts right from the beginning where Adam and Eve eat that apple that they're not supposed to, so they have to journey out of paradise into the wilderness. We have that great story of the Hebrew slaves who are in oppression in Egypt, and God rescues them, and they journey from oppression on their way to freedom, to the promised land, as they journey through this wilderness in the middle. We have the story of Joshua and the folks in the army when they're ready to come into Israel and take it over. And the promise is, if you follow God's rules, you'll be able to completely be successful and take everything over. And they're very faithful, and they do all their fighting, and by the end of the book of Joshua, they've accomplished some things, but then they realize that there are a lot of other people besides them that live in the land, and they're going to have to learn how to get along. Then we have a really sad story of journey where the people are forced off their land because the big empires come in and want to take it over, and so they're placed in other places in refugee camps and outposts, and they just dream of the chance to be able to journey back, and then they get the chance to do that. And a couple generations later, Mary and Joseph are journeying to Bethlehem for the Caesar's census, and it's in that journey that Jesus is born. Then they have to journey down to Egypt to save themselves because they're getting chased by King Herod, who wants to kill him. And then Jesus grows up and journeys toward the cross, a noble journey, but one that we find out near the end he really wished he didn't have to do. But he doesn't, and he journeys through death, and he is resurrected, and he shows up on a mountain, and he tells his disciples to now go and journey to the ends of the earth, bringing my message of God's love for all, helping other people love God like I do, and who they themselves are willing to keep journeying to make disciples. So it's a lot of journeying in the Bible. And we have to maybe ask ourselves, why is the Bible so intent on presenting each story as journey after journey after journey after journey? There really is no staying put, even if you really, really want to. Well, there's a few reasons, I think. One, the Bible wants to remind us over and over and over again that no matter what, life is a journey. No matter where we move through experiences of things, as we take every next step, we're going some new place. A place that we may assume we know what's going on there, but we can't be sure. We never know with every next step what's going to happen. It really is out of our control. And journeying, when we think about it, can be very scary because we like to know where we're going. And the fact is, we really don't. So the Bible tells us don't be afraid of journeying. Because in addition to every story of those journeys in the Bible, there's an emphasis on the fact that God journeys with us. We can't see, smell, taste, touch God, but we can start learning how to sense God's presence, God's peace, God's love, God's wisdom. Maybe we'll hear it in a still small voice. We'll hear it as we pray, as God speaks to us. Or we'll discover it on the lips of someone around us, maybe a surprising person. And we'll know that we're moving into a brave new world, into a brave new future, not alone. So we can journey well. So we don't have to be afraid to journey and stay put and start to die inside, even as we are living. Even those characters in Meet Me in St. Louis are going to have to learn to journey because their lives are going to take them in places they didn't know, couldn't predict, even if they stay put in St. Louis. It's really important for us to embrace the idea of life being a journey. The second thing that I think is really important about journey, and the thing that the Bible wants to teach us about journey, is that when we journey with God and go into the brave new world, go to the great unknown of each new step, we journey not only with a God who wants to travel with us and bring us peace and love and all those sorts of those very nice things. We travel with a God that created the universe with breath. I mean, we go with a spirit that is incredibly powerful and incredibly creative. It's kind of hard to fathom how creative and powerful God is. Take our story of Abram and Sarai, for example, another great story of journey in our Bible. We're told they're very childless. So how is that going to work? Well, we had a lot of fun a couple weeks ago talking about how hilarious it was when God finally comes and tells Sarah she's going to have a baby, and she starts laughing, and that's a really delightful part of the story. But you know what's even more hilarious about this story? It's both funny ha-ha and funny strange. So we know that Sarai and Abram, then who becomes Sarah and Abraham, have this child named Isaac, and Isaac becomes the first descendant of the Jewish people. So this great nation of the Jewish people comes from these two old people and from Isaac. So that is a great nation. There's lots of people that are descended from that one person and those two old people. But wait, there's more. Because out of the Jewish people comes Jesus, who is the first descendant, as it were, of the church. So all those millions and millions of Christians, they're also descendants of Isaac and Abram and Sarah. That is a really great nation. And then, but wait, there's still more. This is the Ginsu knife story of the Bible, I think. Even after the Bible is said and people are using it for their faith work, several generations after that, a guy named Muhammad comes around and has this revelation that creates the Islamic people and has as their descendant Ishmael, who is Abraham and Sarah's other son that was born on this journey. So we have, as descendants of this great nation of Abraham and Sarah, millions and millions and millions more people that probably nobody thought even had any imagination of including when this became a Bible. It's almost as if God doesn't even know how creative God is when God makes a promise. I mean, that is how powerful God can be. It really does blow your mind. And I hope at least once in your life you have an experience where you touch that kind of power of God. And chances are it will happen to you while you're taking some journey into the great unknown, and you have to rely on God and God's presence and God's power and it will blow your mind. I quickly want to tell you one experience of my life where that happened, and that was when I was making my journey into answering my call to ordained ministry. There's many aspects of the story. I'll tell you many parts of it later, but I'll tell you one little part now. And it was kind of came out of nowhere. I was pursuing comedy and entertainment and all that, and I was called to be a minister, a pastor, and it felt really right. I was excited about it, except for one thing. I didn't know if I could be a good leader, because I had spent my whole professional career either as a secretary to pay the rent, or as a stand-up comic where I'm performing on my own, or in an ensemble, but I never actually manned a ship, took care of the chairman of anything. And so I was feeling like, I don't know if I can do this, God. And in my prayer life, I was feeling, really bereft and praying, God, please, I need a leadership opportunity. And of course, I was thinking, what God give me as a leadership opportunity? Give me the opportunity to chair a committee. Give me the opportunity to lead a class. Give me the opportunity to man the craft booth at VBS. Something leadership-y that you do at the church. And it wasn't coming. Did God hear my prayer? And then one day the phone rang at my office, and it was my friend Jill Soloway, who was the director of this play called The Real Life Brady Bunch, where adults put on bad 70s clothes and put on bad 70s wigs, my penchant for wigs. And they would reenact Brady Bunch episodes, that wacky sitcom from the 70s. They'd do it line for line. It was really kitschy. It was a huge hit in Chicago. Then it moved to New York. It was a huge hit in New York. It was in LA. Then I met these guys because I was doing Brady Bunch stuff in my stand-up act. They really liked me. I donated some of the pantsuits that I collected for them to use in their show. And so I was tangentially connected. And anyway, Jill had called me and she said, I have a rather weird request for you, Jane. And I said, what's that? She said, well, I was wondering if you would direct a production of The Real Life Brady Bunch in Sydney, Australia. What? I said, what? I never directed before. Oh, we didn't either when we started this, but I don't know what I'm doing. You like the Brady Bunch the way we do. You'll be fine. So first I wanted to say, that's crazy. No, that's so not what I have on my radar for leadership. And then I said, I'll think about it. Then when I hung up the phone, it came to me. I think this might be God's answer to my leadership opportunity. So much crazier and bigger than anything I could have imagined for my life. And it was just been kind of the beginning of my experience in my walk with God. The more I open myself up to that experience of faith, being vulnerable, the more I say okay to taking that next step, not knowing quite what's going to happen, the more this largesse of God's power and God's creativity, in addition to love and peace and everything else, makes itself known. And I know more and more to never be afraid to take that next step. This experience of directing The Real Life Brady Bunch was not just about learning about leadership, but it was about growing my faith, about growing my relationship and my love for God and my love for this work that nothing else could. And that gets us to the third part of our journey, the reason that I think the Bible is all about journey. That it's not about what it will take us as we move out here in life and out here in the world, but it's about what taking that journey does to our inner world, and to taking us deeper and deeper into our souls, and into our hearts, and into all the things that make us passionate about being alive. And really, that is what this financial stewardship campaign is all about. It's not just about inviting you to think about giving a financial gift to the church because we do great things, because we want to do greater things, and we need all your generosity to make that happen. That is very, very true. But the most important thing about being generous in our giving to the church is what it can do to our faith life, to our commitment to being disciples, and to the excitement that comes into our world when we make some sacrificial space for God to do amazing things. The gifts that we want you to think about giving this year are sacrificial. We want you to think about moving towards tithing. That means 10% of your income. And we're not saying we want people to tithe. That's in the Bible as kind of the standard of giving. But we want you to be brave and first of all, look at what you give and determine what percentage of your income, whether it's post-tax or pre-tax, it really doesn't matter, what percent of your income are you presently giving on a regular basis to God at the church? And perhaps some of you have never given before, so that's okay, you're at zero. Some of you have given for a very long time, and your gift feels a comfortable gift to give. Chances are it's probably about 2.5%. That's the average giving of most regular churchgoers to the church. So there's a lot of room to grow to get to that place of 10% where you really feel like, oh my gosh, how could I ever get by without that much money in my budget? Well, it's a huge opportunity to jump off the deep end and find out. But do it in increments. We're on a journey here. So we really, really want you to prayerfully think about what increase in your giving you would like to give, not because it's for the church so much, as it's for your discipleship journey, for the growth and development of your relationship with God and your discovery of just how amazing our God is when we give God more space, especially when we give God more space in our financial world, which is one of the places we least like to journey with. Because really, I have so much faith and hope and excitement about this congregation and how much potential we have to grow and to bring that message out to others. And it will make a difference the more generous we are to support our budget and support our ministry so we can grow our ministries and do more. But what will really make a difference is when we are all on fire with love for God, because we know indeed God provides all and we can do anything. There is no world out there that isn't too difficult to reach. No place that we can go, that we can't go, that's never been gone to before. We are the people that are called to go out and do amazing things. You know that we can do it. And we will do it because we've got resources. But the number one resource we have is God, that creator that made the world with just words, that brought your pastor to the Real Life Brady Bunch of Sydney, Australia, that somehow gave all of us in our stewardship committee the idea of doing these wacky skits and putting on wigs and having a good time. There really is nothing that we can't do. So I hope that you will pray seriously, and come up next week when we give our commitment cards to something that feels like a faith journey, so that we may bring not a little Christmas, but a big Christmas to ourselves and to our world later and even tomorrow. We sure need it. Thanks be to God. Amen.